Okay, so welcome everyone to today's first session on Lean 101. And I want to begin by pointing out, it says here, today we're going to learn to fish. What comes to mind when I say learn to fish?
I thought you were giving a fish.
You thought I was going to give you a fish?
Yeah.
What else comes to mind?
Well, when I was young, I used to really go fishing.
Okay.
So learn how to fish is really buy a GoPro and sinker, depending on what type, and then when to catch the fish, and it's already taken the bait.
Mm. So if I give you a fish, how long will you eat?
Hold on, I don't know how big the fish is.
How big the fish is? Yeah, you'll eat as long as there is that fish. What if I teach you to fish? So you've heard that old Chinese proverb, of course. And that's kind of what this series is about, is teaching a new skill which is going to be helpful for your team and for the whole office. As we actually know that the senior leadership team in Atlanta is encouraging everyone in Habitat to learn this new skill. Why are they doing that? Because they see that Habitat in its stage of life has gone from being this, family feeling kind of NGO into being an international body now. And we still have processes and systems that are out of date, or just change has brought things along, making the need for change in some of our processes. We've become inefficient to some degree. Welcome.
Sorry.
And so Lean 101, we're going to teach everyone a skill set which is going to enable all of us to become part of helping Habitat to be more effective. One of our core values is stewardship. We have 6 core values. Another one is teamwork and service. So all of these things are wrapped into why we're going to go through this series on Lean 101. So now, I'm not going to ask anybody to introduce themselves and tell what role you are, because we're all on the same team. But I would like to find out what your experience is, previous experience with lean processes, or lean as a principle set. None? Any prior experience?
We did have some 5S trainings before.
Okay.
We heard of that. Japanese concept of 5S.
5S, yeah.
Somehow similar.
Some of this comes out of Japanese management procedures, principles. So there are overlaps for sure. Good morning, Marco.
Sorry.
Jeremy, what about you? Do you have any prior experience with lean?
Not
What about you, Marco? Any prior experience with lean? Okay. So then this is going to be new material for all of you, and one of the benefits of this is that it's going to give you a skill set. I mean, even the kind of thing that you can put on your resume, saying you've been trained in it, you know how to look at a process and analyze it from a lean perspective. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll all earn something that we're calling a yellow belt. So, a yellow belt.
Okay, Sensei, let's do it.
Okay, so now the next question is, do you have any concerns or expectations about our 5 sessions on lean?
When's the last session going to be completed? Just curious.
We're fitting these 3 sessions, we're kind of crunching them. Ideally they're over 5 weeks, but we're crunching them a little bit because of travel schedules.
Oh, okay.
So we'll be done by the end of July.
Oh, great.
You still here? Any other questions, concerns, expectations about this learning time?
How can we get from
We'll cover that later.
Start with yellow.
Okay,
Right?
so
I remember last time that the main concern was actually implementing it. How do you plan to do this after? Because we did the same orientation 3 quarters ago. Then the common concerns of everyone was, how are we going to do it? Are we going to the same office policy?
Good question, and that is a good point. We did have kind of a brief overview of it last August, and some people from the office here joined that. Were you part of that as well?
I was talking about, but I was meaning to say.
Okay, yeah. And that being just an overview meant that people didn't get to dive into some of the activities related to it. So this is going to be a fuller learning experience. But to answer your question, we're hoping that we're planning that. Once everyone from around the office has been trained in this, we will go to the next step, which is to look at projects that involve process improvements between departments around the office. We're going to start with our own individual workspace or our own individual team, or the closer to us groups where we have more automatic say-so. We have control or power over our own work. So the course objectives here is to empower all employees to continuously initiate and implement improvements in value, quality, responsiveness, and productivity. This course is about a desire to invest in you to help you learn improvement tools and skills that you can use your whole career. What stands out to you on this slide?
Improvement in value, quality, responsiveness, and productivity.
Okay.
Where is efficiency?
Can you speak up a little bit? I didn't hear you.
I was looking for efficiency.
You were looking for efficiency. Efficiency doesn't show up in here, but I think it's a subset of improvements.
Yeah, improvements in
Responsiveness, productivity. I think efficiency is kind of implied here. Probably could actually even add the word to make it clearer. What else jumps out at you?
Oh, something that can improve the whole career.
Yeah.
how many more years left? How many more years,
One thing I want to point out here, no one has mentioned it so far, but I think it's quite important, is this word empower. To empower all employees. So we do have an organization where decisions come top down from the AMT, and we sometimes need to push decisions up to them. But that's something actually that through this process we want to begin to create some culture change where people are taking some more initiative in themselves, that when you see something that can be fixed, that should be fixed, you take some initiative. You may not do it by yourself. You can if it's within your own area. But you may start a conversation about improving things. As we go through the day, as ideas come up about improvements that you see that need to happen around the office, I'm going to write them up here. Right. Marco?
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe that's also as opposed to having a policy in place. Maybe empowering all employees, meaning it doesn't have to be a policy. It can be like a culture or a realization from oneself to be more efficient. Yeah, because they see the value of it as opposed to being compliant with policy.
Yes. It's a democratic way of thinking about work. People who are closest to the work know the most about it. And yet sometimes we feel that we can't make decisions about our own work because somebody else has to make the decision for us. The whole value here is that we're encouraging people to take initiative, and we're giving them permission to do that.
And I think the next big thing is continuously initiate.
Yeah.
So training for your orientations like this, I think the effects are just maybe short term. But then continuously initiate, there must be something in this course, or maybe like relationships after this course that might help. That I expect. I'm trying to express my expectation that continuously support the continuous articulation of the intention of this
Right.
course.
And in that it's continuous, you'll remember when we covered change management recently, change management courses. Lean 101 is a type of change management. It's looking at a specific kind of issue, problem, fits in this box. It's the things that are inefficient, things that are problems, and bringing change to them. You'll see quite a few similarities. But in change management, we talked about the difference between transformational change and incremental change, step by step. Lean 101 tends to lean more heavily towards incremental change. It's the continuous process of just making things a little better, a little better, a little better. Marco?
Yeah, my question is related to when we say improvement, is it more the business process? What specifically are we talking? There's a lot to improve or a lot to get relief. So are we talking about business process, policy, procedures, processes, maybe policies, maybe policies is not
It can be all of these things, and that will become clearer as we go on a little farther. So today is the first of a series of 5. Each of the parts should be just an hour, and then you have some homework that you can kind of at your desk as you're working on your regular work. You bring, it's not going to take you away from your work. It's something you do in your work. So it's bringing on, like putting on a new pair of glasses, which brings focus to something in a different way, or colored glasses changes the way things appear. So session 1 is discovering guiding principles for process improvement, learning to see waste. Welcome. Yeah, come on right up. It's learning to see waste. When I asked previously if any of you had experience with lean at the very beginning, I know that Alma has experience with it. We've already had conversations about ways to improve processes in the department. So we're going to learn to see waste today. You can't fix a problem if you don't recognize it. Then in the subsequent weeks, we'll learn how to measure value, the value that we do in our work through the eyes of the customer. And then once we've learned to see waste after today, next time we'll learn some tactics for eliminating waste. In change management, we talked about tactics for bringing about a change, and that's where this fits in here. Session 3, we will learn to understand the needs of the customer, how to standardize operations, and we'll give a project called a Just Do It project, individual. Session 4 will prioritize opportunities for improvement and turn customer needs into charted improvements, and these will be bigger projects we call DMAIC projects. We'll cover that later. That's when we start looking at more transformational or broader, bigger types of change initiatives that are lean related. And then session 5 will cover the 5-step improvement process for the bigger projects. So let's go next to defining what lean means, and so that by having this definition, we're in agreement about what we're talking about. So if you Google lean, you come up with a definition that looks like this. It's a customer-centric methodology used to continuously improve any process through the elimination of waste in everything that you do. It is based on the idea of continuous incremental improvement and respect for people. Actually, that's a definition that comes from the book Lean for Dummies. You've probably heard of the 4 Dummies series of books, breaking things down into understandable bits. And that's where this quote comes from. So, what grabs your attention in this slide? What words stand out in this definition? Customer-centric? Yeah.
The everything you do, because most of the things that we do here were just a part of the long process. So we have no control over how to make them efficient or how to eliminate waste, because we're just a part of the process. That's why this requires like collective review or collective way of looking at it. For example, if you mention FTR, or recruitment or procurement. So these are the things that we do, but we're just a tiny part of it.
Yeah.
So improving that part would be difficult for us because we have no control over the entire process.
So if you want to improve a process and you're part of it, you do need to include the other people. And that's where respect for people comes in. Like I said
These are
before.
established processes. EPY or even HQ.
They will vary in their degree of establishment. Some of them are highly established policies. Sometimes there are things that are just, it's how we do things around here, but they're kind of unspoken policies or unspoken rules. And they can be sources of real inefficiency. Like I said before, the people who are closest to the work usually understand it best, or they see problems in it. So that's where respect for people comes in, because we're respecting our colleagues across the aisle as also being part of the process. We need to respect their input.
For our clients.
For our clients, our customers, voice of the customer is something we're going to dive into a little later on. Client, customer, beneficiary, different terms that kind of cycle around the same thing. And then continuous incremental improvement I mentioned earlier. And then in the very heart of it, it's the elimination of waste. Inefficiency is a fancier way of saying waste. Waste of time, waste of money, waste of manpower, waste of resources. So lean is about identifying and eliminating that waste. Now, where does lean fit into our strategic plan? Say that again? In everything?
We're talking about processes.
You just said it, everything that we do.
All that we do.
In each of the houses.
So the programs department supports which house predominantly?
One predominantly, and then three, the foundation.
So in your areas, as we start the lean journey, you'll look predominantly at your own area, look in your own backyard. You know, like they say, you know, before you can pull the log, the speck out of somebody else's eye, pull the log out of your own. I don't know if you've heard that expression before. It's a verse. Look in our own house first, in our own domain. But then we're going to begin to see waste in other people's areas. Actually, it's sometimes more easy to see the area of waste in other people's areas because those are the things that frustrate us with our work. Someone else, we feel like they're slowing us down.
I think there are examples, especially in construction. Before one house can be constructed in 1.5 months or 4 months. But I saw one technology in Indonesia. They can build a house in just 4 days. It's a bit expensive, but if you look at the number of hours, so I think total it can be cheaper compared to the old construction. But 4 days, that's a good.
In terms of time, it's very efficient. It comes with a slightly higher cost. So depending on your perspective, usually there are choices, there are balances, there are value judgments that need to be made. So at the bottom of the slide here, we have a definition of operational excellence, which is, of course, very close to one of our core values. Consistent and reliable execution of the business strategy, evidenced by results, increased customer value, lower operational risk, lower operating costs, and increased revenues. Increased revenues, well, we're not a business, we're an NGO, but translate that into things, more savings. But in processes, it could be that even for the RD department where you have increase in donorship because you've improved the process.
Even in BNB, using technology. Gathering of information is only a capital. The problems of your phones.
Hmm.
You can send the information using GIS. So generating data can be very more efficient using technologies.
Yeah. Introducing a technology that saves time, saves energy, is one great tactic. There are risks with you introducing technology, but you control for those things. So here on this slide, we have two areas of our work. One we call the whirlwind. The other we call our goals, meaning the real big targets. The difference here is that the whirlwind is all those things that just kind of keep you busy throughout the day, including perhaps some things that are not necessarily directly tied to your biggest objectives, but they're things you have to do. They're part of your job. Answering emails. If you're in the training department, some of the whirlwind will be, setting up your training activities. It's not tied to actually delivering training, but it's all the little things that you have to do to get set up for it. You've heard of the difference between the urgent and the important. What is most important as opposed to what just feels so urgent you have to respond to it. The urgent is oftentimes what fits into the whirlwind. So there we go. Now, the whirlwind acts on you. You feel like it controls you. It's like it's inescapable sometimes. And the goals are things that you want to be acting upon. So lean empowers us to eliminate the waste from our whirlwind to create time for strategic goals and activities. So you've heard of the 80-20 principle, how 80% of our greatest gains come from 20% of our resources, of our efforts. It's that sometimes when too much is given into the whirlwind, too much of our time, we don't have enough time for the things that really count. So lean is the process of looking for ways that there is waste in here, eliminating that waste so that we can spend more time on the things that really matter to us. And that's an extremely hopeful proposition. So some of the guiding principles to lean, there are 6 guiding principles. We are teaching lean throughout all of Habitat to create a common improvement language so that as people talk about something, they use terminology, other people automatically understand what it means, what they mean. By having a common language helps to reduce confusion, or helps to improve the quality of communication. We get our jobs done more easily as we are able to speak the same language. It's kind of the reverse of the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel, where humanity's languages were created, our communication was confused by so many different languages. We're reversing that process in our workplace. The second area is to develop a common improvement approach. This is quite a bit like when we did the change management training recently. We want people to have a similar terminology approach to bringing about change. Another principle is that we start change by listening to the voice of the affiliate, the volunteer, the donor, the employee, the co-worker, a team member. We listen to what other people are saying, and we demonstrate to them that respect for people. To turn it around and say we don't start change just by making up our minds that we want to do things differently without taking other people into consideration. Because we might save ourselves time, but we might create more of a mess for other people. You start by listening to the voice of the customer. With Lean 101 in its fullest implementation, you want to have a baseline with measurable wins. Wins that are created by yourself, your coworkers, by employees themselves. Going back to the one about listening to the voice of the customer, I think this is really where the team effort comes into it. Like Joseph was talking about yesterday, together everyone accomplishes more. Team. So when you're listening broadly to your stakeholders, and then you implement a change, the quality of that change, the improvement in efficiency is going to be more significant when you've done that.
Prioritize the ways to implement the lean, like having a common approach, common language, or is that the principles of how to do it?
These are the foundational principles of Lean overall. Lean within an organization gives you common language, gives you common approach. Lean isn't quite lean if you're not listening to your stakeholders, to other people. The principle of mutual benefit is looking for a win-win solution. If we save ourselves time but create more work for someone else, that's not really what Lean is about. We want to keep those other things in mind. Consider our impact. And then, above and beyond everything else, the purpose of Lean is to help us to achieve our strategic goals. We are a very mission-driven organization, very much driven by our desire to benefit the families. Even though we're not out on the field very often, I'm really never in the field. But I know that my job is tied into serving the people that we serve. So that helps me to be motivated. Now, a key point about Lean is that when 20 to 25% of people begin to use a similar improvement approach and language, change experts say that the pace of change can literally double as people are working from the same playbook. So that's why we're going to provide this training to everyone around the office. Some people will take to it, they will accept it, they will jump into it and get active with Lean more quickly than others. As long as we have a high enough number of people who are energetic about it, we can really make a significant change around the area office and our policies.
Is it a prerequisite to Six Sigma? Is it?
Well, they're different. It's not a prerequisite. Six Sigma really focuses on reducing the error rate, like in manufacturing. It's in a different kind of an industry. But Lean and Six Sigma are similar in that they are focused on improving processes, policies, activities to improve success. So we want to go after waste to increase value. And here we have a pie chart that says on average 5 to 10% of service processes are perceived as value added to our stakeholders and customers. This could be interpreted as endless opportunities to improve. We're involved in our work, we're conducting a process, and the people that we're doing it for, they may value about 5 to 10% of our work. The other 90 to 95% doesn't matter to them. How does that strike you? The people you're serving value about 5 to 10% of your work. Jeremy, what are you thinking?
Well, I can't really speak to Habitat yet, because I haven't been hearing that. But in my 10 years of previous work, that's pretty accurate. Just in terms of, you know, when you're talking to constituents or you're talking to customers, you know, they don't really care what happens in the background as long as they get what they want. So it seems pretty accurate. It's not that there's necessarily a misappreciation, if that is a word, but it's more that, you know, they have so many other problems going on in their own life that it's, you know, it's not really about you, it's about them. So that's why, but if you blow up that 5%, that's probably where they live, as opposed to the other 95%, which is where we live.
Yeah. This 95% over here involves a lot of whirlwind activities. Any other thoughts about this? Ami?
Just an example. There's this local actor in Myanmar who expressed interest to do a documentary of our project. So I checked with the comms people what are the requirements, how we're going to do it. So after the discussion and we relayed the information to the foundation, they just had one comment. Okay, too many requirements. So they said, okay, let's just do it, you know, a few months later because, yeah.
A lot of what fits in here are requirements. Rules, policies, procedures.
Yeah, even risk management requires
Yeah, they are.
has to be very, very careful up to the minutest detail. But new products doesn't care about these things. They just want to develop new products and then invention, for example, requires starts and stops and reprogram. So some probably are necessary. Especially in the risk, there's so many things that you need to consider before you really decide on things. So there's no more risk taking on part of organizations that's having this risk management.
Well, risk management is important. It's, you know, oftentimes it's everything. It's part of what is in here. But of this pie chart, what stands out as the most important thing? The things that your customers want. And so if we're really honest with ourselves, most of what we do, or a lot of what we do, is just waste. Risk management is an activity that you need to do to make sure that your enterprise continues. But if you make risk management into this really complicated process, you're only going to increase all of your whirlwind activities. Keep it simple. Keep it straightforward. So here we have an endless opportunity to improve. Just to give an example, if you go see a stage play, and you want to sit in the audience, why are you going to see a play?
See the play.
To see the play, to be entertained, to hear a story. But to give a play, the producers of the play have to have all this background stuff behind the scenes. You need people who create the backdrops and people who do the makeup and the lighting and the sound.
That's necessary.
It's necessary, but if at any moment, as a person sitting in the audience, you become aware of what's going on, it's because some mistake was made somewhere. If they're successful behind the scenes, the person watching doesn't even know they're there. That's the idea in being stage management. The audience shouldn't be distracted by it. So if we are serving somebody, and to some degree the programs department has people around the office that you support them to support the countries to some degree. If we have an internal process in our department and we burden our customer, our client, our coworker with our own internal process, then we diminish their appreciation of what we do. Marco.
Okay, I have a question. So each one of us has a customer. Our customers are national office and certain groups, so AMD, for example. Then the SMEs have specific customers as well, or let's say finance has a different customer as well. So we don't always have the same customer in mind, and sometimes that creates the conflict or the difference between what is efficiency in their eyes and efficiency in our eyes. So how do you more or less make that work? Is it always going to what the end user is? For example, the end user, let's say a customer, any customer, hates controls. Why is there a need to have those things? They see that as an inefficiency.
Yeah.
That increases their impatience and all that. But if you ask a certain department, let's say finance, why they do that, or why they have to standardize things the way it is, and they'll say because they have a customer that requires, say, the internal audit or the auditors, or this person says, no, this has to be insured. So that sometimes creates a conflict. So I guess it's a judgment call on that end. But I mean, how do you really say it? Is it a waste? If you talk to one person, they'll say no. To you, you will say yes. There goes your language.
Well, another example to go with that, I think that's maybe just saying what you said in a different way. Let's say you have a donor who has certain requirements on their donation, on their grant. Grant givers always have some kind of requirements, but the people in the field might not necessarily appreciate or value that. So you have to balance. There's always going to be a certain degree of balancing, but that's one reason why, as we talked about in the major principles of Lean 101, you want to listen to a broad spectrum of stakeholders. And I guess there won't always be easy answers.
So it's just managing the groups.
Yes.
And finding the best.
Yes. Yeah, and you need to figure out on any particular decision which are the stakeholders that are most important that you need to make sure they are pleased.
I think that's why it's advised in this unit 101 you need to look at your immediate neighborhood first, because they are your immediate stakeholders. Therefore, you share common interests and common ideas, and therefore, when you want to work out something, everyone will benefit in the neighborhood. Now, when you work with the people with like next neighborhood out there, then you might have like very small interacting interests, and therefore you have like a little bit more of distance. Then it's also there is a very little space to collaborate that shading place between the two of you, and therefore there can be little opportunities also to be more work efficiently. So you have very smaller goals as compared to immediate neighborhood where you share a lot of goals together.
And to some degree, this conversation is going into some of the topics that we'll cover a little bit later. For today, I want to keep it pretty slimmed down to the objective of making sure that we learn how to recognize waste where it is. I mean, hopefully, but after today, before our next session on Friday, you'll come back with a list of all these areas where you're suddenly recognizing waste for what it is. You see it all around us. Ami, did you have a comment?
No, I think what he said is just one example of looking at it, starting small and then going deeper. Another approach could be, like, for example, identify top 5 processes that employees normally deal with, and then look at each process from beginning to end. That would involve a lot of departments or a lot of people, and see how we can improve the process. So it could be starting small or starting big. Things where most people could relate to, top 5 business processes.
When it comes to taking on bigger projects,
Systems.
we will be covering that then, starting with the 4th session out of our 5. We're going to be learning to walk before we learn to run, in a sense. Before you become a world-class basketball player, you practice dribbling. I mean, it's just the most basic of skills. You dribble the ball. You learn to do that well. And learning to see waste is kind of like that. It's kind of like that most basic of skill. So, again, so in this first session, we're learning to see waste. We want to give waste a name. Earlier we said we're going to have a common language. Names are part of language. Language is the process of giving everything names. When Adam named all of the animals, he created a language. So we're going to give waste a name and empower all people to call it out and say, hey, that's waste. I see waste there. And then after they've identified and said, hey, I see waste over there, or I see waste right here, then to help and to eliminate it. So there are 9 deadly forms of waste. That's what we call it. 9 deadly forms of waste. It's the foundation of continuous improvement. You've heard the expression that you can't improve something that you cannot measure. That's kind of a basic principle of project management. In order to improve something, you have to measure it. In order to improve on the Lean 101 scale, you have to be able to recognize waste. Performance equals potential minus interference. Kind of a linguistic way of putting it into a mathematical formula. Our top performance happens when we are working at our fullest potential and reducing all forms of interference. So Usain Bolt, world's fastest man, can perform fantastically when he's running at his best fit condition and he's not running through water. He's not going to run his fastest if he's running through, a forest that's on fire and he's, got all the smoke in his way. Any kind of interference is going to keep him from running at his best. So interference, again, is another way of talking about waste. Things that prevent us from hitting our best performance. So here now are the 9 forms of waste. Overproduction, transportation, inventory. Jabal, you're going to get this on slides. You can take a picture if you like, but you'll get the slides too.
Be lean.
Overproduction.
You're wasting
Don't waste the
your
memory.
battery, man.
Don't waste the memory.
Waiting, unnecessary processing, rework, motion, intellect, and environmental. So we're going to break these down and look for some specific examples. Examples that we see around Habitat, examples that you see sitting at your desk.
Waiting.
What's the word?
Waiting is number 1.
Tell me about it. Tell me more about waiting.
I want to get a contract approved.
Wait,
Waiting is number 1. I waited how many weeks just to get approved. he calls this contract variation, which I would normally do in one day.
Gusto mo production.
Kasi overproductive.
Claro, waiting, and what are the requirements in the too many products?
Do we wait on anything else? What other kinds of waiting do we experience? Waiting for data, waiting for reports.
Or even
And you
advice.
feel
Advice.
Advice? What about overproduction? Producing more than is needed immediately. The first example I can think of is like producing 10,000 copies of a brochure and having to throw away 6,000 of them because they're obsolete before you've used them all. Ordering 5 stacks of business cards, but then your role changes and you never used 4 of the stacks.
Some people call it savings. Bulk order per sales.
That is a fantastic marketing thing that S&R uses, Costco uses. Buy things in bulk. How much of that actually goes to waste? It goes rotten before you eat it. Yeah. So of those of you who went to the global conference in Atlanta, a lot of the presenters had handouts. We were volunteers in some of the presenter rooms. How many of you had to take back a handful of unused handouts, reams of paper that the participants never took home with them? They never wanted it.
especially the English language